Today, I'm going to talk about one of the most important Supreme Court cases when it comes to student free speech. This is none other than Tinker versus Moines. This case is all about students' rights and whether schools can limit freedom of expression. Without further ado, let's dive in. So, to understand this case, we need some background. The Vietnam War lasted from 1955 to 1975, but by the 1960s, the US became so heavily involved, the government had begun drafting young men. This made the war even more controversial, as it led to a rise in protests, especially among young people, who started challenging authority on issues like war, race, and government policies. The people at the center of this case were three students: Mary Bess Tinker, who was just 13 years old at the time; John Tinker, her 15-year-old brother; and Christopher Eckhart, a 16-year-old student who joined them in the protests. They believed the Vietnam War was wrong, so they decided to take their stand at their school. But before we go any further, here are some key terms we need to understand. First off is symbolic speech. This is the expression of ideas through actions or symbols rather than words. Then we have the substantial disruption test, a legal test to determine if student speech can be limited in schools. Lastly, we have precedent, a legal decision that serves as a guide for future cases. These three concepts play a huge role in this case and are important to remember. So what did these students do? Mary Beth, John, and Christopher wore black armbands to school as a silent protest against the Vietnam War. The school reacted by suspending them, saying the protests could cause a disruption. Obviously, the students and their families decided to fight back, and this all led to a 4-year legal battle that went all the way to the Supreme Court. This case was argued on November 12th of 1968 and then decided on February 24th of 1969. The Tinkers' arguments were that the armbands were a form of symbolic speech, therefore meaning it was protected by the First Amendment, while the school argued that the armbands could disrupt learning, so schools should have the right to limit student speech. Ultimately, the Supreme Court ruled 7-2 in favor of the Tinkers, saying that students do have free speech rights in schools as long as it doesn't disrupt their learning environment. This case set an important legal precedent as firstly it established the substantial disruption test. This meant that schools can't censor student speech unless it significantly disrupts school operations. Secondly, it strengthened student free speech rights. The ruling made it clear that schools are not speech-free zones. Students keep their constitutional rights in school. And lastly is that it has been used in future cases, just like, sadly I cannot say that name, but BL in 2021, where a cheerleader was suspended for swearing on Snapchat. Obviously, this does not mean go swear on Snapchat and win a case, but it does show how the precedent of Tinker and free speech at school, it has been influential till this day. as this case still matters today, especially with social media and student activism, as we've seen. As Justice Abe Fortas famously said in the ruling, students do not shed their constitutional rights at the schoolhouse gate. This statement has shaped how we view student free speech for over 50 years. To wrap it up, Tinker vs. Des Moines is a landmark case that protects students' rights to express themselves in school, unless it causes a real disruption. It set a lasting precedent and continues to influence free speech cases today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you now have a better understanding of why this case is so important.